Today, we're going to be talking about membership, digging into the ways that various existing libraries of things are charging and not charging for memberships, what benefits and privileges are offered, and issues around access and accessibility. Access to libraries of things and spaces, but also accessibility to be able to get to and utilize the items that the libraries of things have. We've got a great set of presenters today, including Tim Willison from the Toronto Tool Library and Toronto Tool Library Maker.
I'm the executive director currently at the Toronto Tool Library, as well as the TTL Makerspace. And so kicking it off in terms of membership, yeah, we have a tiered membership system currently. It wasn't always like that. Up until 2017, it was a single tier with a really simple pricing structure. Currently, we have three tiers. So we have the basic, which is 55 Canadian dollars per year. That gives people 3-day borrowing terms with some borrowing fees that could be anywhere from $2 to $10. They're mostly on items that have a battery or have a really high maintenance involved with them. We have the twice fund, which is 85 for the year. That gives you the 7 days borrowing and has the exact same fee, borrowing fee structure as the basic. And then we have the high five, which is 110 for the year, actually gives 14 days of borrowing and has no fees associated with it, except for late fees, of course. Those apply across the board. And then in terms of other benefits that apply to all the membership tiers, there's no item limits. We have a few different monthly workshops, like a tool basics and sewing workshop and so forth, that are educational in nature and very hands-on. We have a fair amount of project mentoring. People will come in and describe what their project is, like they're trying to, fix their kitchen or something like that. And we'll give them lots of advice on how they could approach it, what tools they would use. And we have a fairly good library of educational materials that we've made that everybody gets access to. Now, all of this said, I don't think our structure's that good. It needs work. And I can talk a little bit in the next slide about changes that occurred over time. So the Toronto Tool Library in late 2017 engaged in a fairly large campaign to save the Toronto Tool Library. Had run into a number of different financial difficulties and problems, and so needed basically to raise funds. Now, I think that the change to the tiered system was basically in response to that financial need and trying to figure out some way that would work better than the simple system. Now, the campaign was successful. Before too long, the similar problems started to occur again. I got involved in late 2018 and became the executive director early 2019. And so started working on the problem. So the change to the tiered system, I think there were a few problems generated by that. The first was that it was somewhat confusing for people. It was very simple messaging prior to that, and explaining the different tiers and the conditions of the different tiers is a little bit harder to manage for staff and a little bit harder to digest for people who are coming to the tool library. But the big problem was that it vastly increased the costs in terms of storage, especially the top tier with the high five and the 14-day borrowing. If you think about it, 4 to 5 basic members could use a tool during the same time that a high five member will have it. And so this then means you need to stock a lot more inventory, which means you need a lot more space. You have a lot more repair parts and brands and trim levels and so forth that you have to support. And personally, I think probably the real unexpected problem is that it sort of took us in a different direction from the mission. Because if you think about it, with no fees at the highest tier, it sort of ends up that people who have more money and can afford to the more expensive tier are sort of being subsidized by people who have less money and pay those borrowing fees. Certainly this is not an intentional effect, but it became apparent afterwards. And then we also have noted many times that people who have those very long borrowing terms are much more likely to procrastinate and bring the tool back having not actually used it. Because human nature, I've taught in college, people always, if they have a long time to write a paper, they wait until a couple of days before. It's the same thing with tools. Those were kind of big lessons learned. In terms of advice we could give, keeping good data is probably the number one thing. Reviewing inventory and being aware of the hard costs associated with the different inventory. That can include removing items that are very rarely borrowed or perhaps never borrowed. Here in Toronto, it's famously the most expensive city in Canada. And we're in the most dense urban area of the most expensive city, so space is at a premium. Planning for the effects of inflation. So I think the reason we ended up with a tier system was because we didn't have logical, like small increases rated against inflation. And so costs kept going up until, it kind of caught the whole organization by surprise. We're actually in some trouble. Putting some of what you make back into tangible improvements and being good at communicating those to the members so that they know those things are available is really important. You probably want to have a plan for some level of staffing after the initial years of operation, and avoiding like complicated, difficult to understand membership systems, and then planning for and communicating about the evolution of the organization over time. Probably what you are doing in year one and year two may become less effective in year 4, 5, and beyond. And so planning so that no one gets left behind or wonders what's going on as changes happen is pretty important.
You talked about that you moved to the tiered system. Can you go in a little bit more detail? Like how are you planning on changing moving forward? What are you going to do in Toronto?
So we're definitely going to move away from the tiered system. We started talking about that more than 2 years ago, just to get people used to the idea. The problem is that once you give something to people, it is very difficult to remove it. They get used to it. And so what we've been doing is building up our other organization in the makerspace until it would reach a point that, in order to roll back some of the changes, it would not be an ending event for the tool library if we had a sudden loss of membership or dip in membership. Now, that may be overly cautious. I think the satisfaction levels are very high among the members. And in the downtown area, as I say, it's not easy running something like this. So it's a well-loved feature, but just to be on the safe side, we've been building up our makerspace so that we would be able to absorb any temporary losses that we might have as we transition away from tiers, and especially as we remove that 14-day borrowing that's been the biggest.
And what percentage of your income do the membership dues cover? And then a follow-up from Francesca is what percentage of members are at that top tier?
So it's about, for the last question, it's about 55% of members are at the top tier. Memberships make up the bulk of the revenue, I would say, like around 80% of revenue comes from that. But this, again, is most likely due to the fact that we have 55% of our members that don't pay any borrowing fees. And
Mhm.
that really needs to be corrected so that it's more evenly distributed across all of the membership, I think.
Got it. And Claire asks, so these changes from the tiered system, in relation to it, did you predict that you would have to have more space or acquire more tools to cover the deficit? Or is that something that was foreseen?
It was rather unexpected, the effect that that would have. And I honestly, I would say didn't fully reveal itself until the pandemic. During the
Mhm.
pandemic, we had to do a lot of reorganization, and we started, really calculating up like, well, what is the cost of the square footage that we're using compared to its utilization? I guess you would term it opportunity cost.
Mhm.
And so we reorganized all of that during the pandemic with the goal that, when we come out of pandemic conditions, we'll have a short runway to get our momentum back again. I guess the positive side of it was we had time to think and organize and really plan our strategy there, and look at the overall effect of the tiered system.
And I've got another kind of, maybe it's a side question, but it's my memory that Toronto Tool Library had, there was 2 or 3 locations at one point in time. Is that right?
Yeah, there were three
Yeah.
locations. So there was one in Parkdale, one on St. Clair, and then where I am right now is at the Spadina location. So after 4 months of closures in the pandemic,
Hmm.
we had to close the St. Clair location. Then the Parkdale location, our space there actually got closed because of a mold problem. And so they had to do quite a bit of renovation work in there. So we basically took the Spadina location and rolled a lot of our resources into there, which I think ended up being a very good survival strategy during the pandemic. Most of our locations were open less than 20 hours a week, whereas here we're open every day, and the hours are a lot more convenient to folks. Now, we are benefiting from also being in the same location as the makerspace. So we have a lot of benefits of being able to kind of share resources between them. And some of the staffing is also shared between the two organizations. So those
Hmm.
things kind of helped us to get through the tough time, and then have kind of helped us to thrive and succeed following that. We are much more stabilized now than we were in previous
Hmm.
years, and we don't really have a reliance on things like public funding and so forth.
Did members from those little locations transition to this singular location, or was there some shedding of members at that time?
The majority of them moved to the single location.
Okay.
The locations were not spread out that far.
Hmm.
It's about 15, 20 minutes between them. We we have about 80% of the membership that we had with 3 locations, we currently have with the single location.
Can you just touch back on real quick about the relationship between the makerspace and the tool library? Is there a
Mhm.
joint membership for those, or any other types of perks related to being a member of one or the other?
Well, they are completely separate. The
Okay.
Canadian government requires us to keep them quite separate because they have different organizational incorporations.
Hmm.
The Tool Library is a nonprofit. The Makerspace is a registered charity. So they are required to be quite separate. Now, I will say a lot of people do end up getting memberships with both because it's they are very symbiotic relationship there.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people working in the maker space will get a tool library membership to take some
Hmm.
things home to finish up projects. A lot of people coming into the tool library are quite surprised and ask, hey, what's going on over there?
Hmm.
It looks like there's a full shop over there. And so the tool library provides a nice introduction to people who might
Yep.
be interested to come into the maker.
When you transition from the single fee to the tiered structure, how engaged were your existing members in identifying the kind of the price points and the benefits? And two, can you go in a little bit more detail about how you're planning to adjust the multi-tier system and if there's a plan to engage members in that process and what you think that'll look like?
Yeah, I think yeah, people are fairly conscious of like they definitely think about it when they're selecting their tier. If I'm understanding the question correctly,
Mhm.
like people are fairly price conscious. I think what one thing that is nice for people is that if they get a say the basic tier and they find that they
Mhm.
need more than 3 days of borrowing, we'll deduct what they've already paid from upgrading to one of the other tiers.
Mhm.
So that gives people a fairly non-threatening way to get started. But I do think they choose rather carefully when they're selecting their membership. In terms of transitioning away from the tier system, I think it's really all coming down to communication. As I say, we have started communicating this stuff out through our website and just talking to the members. And I think a lot of people buy the higher tier directly because they want to support more and don't really have that inside view that it actually creates more problems for the tool library than does the more basic tiers. So I think really it's an education effort. We've got a pretty active
Mhm.
mailing list. We have a very active Discord community. And I think that those things are going to be pretty important. We also have events like member appreciation events where we invite everybody in and, share some food
Mhm.
and chat with people. And I think those are going to provide a really good opportunity. So hopefully we've done our work well enough. It won't be a big surprise.
And how many members total do you have?
There's 900 for the tool library, who
Mhm.
are the active members from a pool of about 5,000 who sort of come and go. And then
Okay.
for the makerspace, there's 160 active monthly members from a pool of about 800 that will come and go as they have
Okay.
projects.
Thank you, Tim.
Hey everybody, my name's Keenan Phillips. I am on the board of directors for the Asheville Tool Library, have been for a little over 3 years now. So just getting you some pictures because I know the words and the slides can be a little bit boring. That's our website homepage and showing over on the right. That's myself and co-board member Stephanie Kane, whose house I'm actually at because I'm a contractor working on it. You can see our hours there. That was during our move into our most recent space. So there's a lot more stuff in there, but just had a picture to throw in. So here's a few quick stats. We use the My Turn software and have been for pretty much the entirety of our 8 years. We've completed around 70,000 loans. We currently have around 900 members and 2,800 items. You can see over to the left that there's about 59 things that are currently overdue. So that's not too bad out of all those items. So all of our members, we don't do any tiers or anything. Everybody gets access to those 2,800 or so items. Things are available for rent for up to 7 days at a time. We don't have an explicit maximum number of tools. The maximum number of tools as well as renewals on tools are somewhat left to the lead librarian's discretion. They're going to check things like availability of those tools. If it's chop saws, like something that we have a dozen or so of, and we have 10 of them there and somebody wants to renew it, we'll let them do that. We've had a few issues with people taking out a lot of tools and then having a hard time keeping track of them and getting them all back. So it just kind of depends on if we see a big reservation of like 30, 40, 50 tools, we might kind of ask around and check in with each other, maybe look back at that member's history to see if we're concerned about that number of tools. We have some small usage fees on some items that have like really high consumable costs. So concrete saw is one example of that. They require a diamond blade that can, on a bigger saw, cost somewhere around $100. So at most, we're charging about $10 per item. We've also got a big 4-inch chipper, and a gas MIG welder is another example that comes. You can get the gas tank with it. So that's $10 per borrowing as well, because you're going to consume some of that gas. And we ask folks if they empty it in their turn to take it by the place to get it refilled and bring it back filled up, and we'll give them the money back for the whole refill charge if they didn't use the whole thing. Late fees are, for most things, $1 per tool per day. We keep batteries, chargers, and the actual like cordless tool that they may go with as separate items in our inventory. It's just easier to keep track of things. Sometimes somebody wants 2 or 3 batteries. Each of those things, though, the battery, the charger, and the tool, are considered as individual items. So each of those is going to have that $1 per tool per day late fee. And those late fees do accrue even on our closed days. We're open Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, and Sunday. You can see the specific hours there. That's how we've been doing it. Most people do not seem to be bothered by that. That seems like a pretty small amount, but it actually makes up, I want to say, somewhere around 20% of our annual income. It's kind of helpful. As far as perks, members really don't have any perks other than everything that's up there. The perks we do for active volunteers, because we only have one paid employee, and they are paid for about 20 to 25 hours a week. So otherwise, we are very heavily rely on volunteers. So to be qualified as an active volunteer, that is working more than 15 hours per quarter. And at the end of each quarter, when our tool library manager checks through everybody's hours, they pick out a small gift for everybody. Sometimes it's tool library swag. Sometimes it's gift cards to different places around town. It varies. They also get invited to quarterly volunteer socials and potluck events. And then probably the best thing is they get the door code, and they are allowed to come in 24/7, get something. They are trained to properly check things in and out, and considered to be responsible enough to, make sure they're not bringing back broken things and just throwing them in inventory and pretending like nothing happened. For us, that's, I would say, most worth prioritizing, because we really, really need volunteers. This is our website homepage. You go to one page and you can do the membership, or you can also apply for a scholarship. And Bobby pointed out to me earlier, he thought it was really cool that they're just kind of on the same page. The scholarship isn't super isolated from paid membership, and that maybe that just is a small thing that makes it easier for people that are, needing that scholarship to be able to go down that path. So our sliding scale paid memberships, currently we have a sliding scale of $50 to $250 a year. If somebody goes online to sign up for one on their own, the preset that we have is right in the middle of that range at $150. We raised that about a couple years ago. Our sliding scale was $50 to $150, and we had a $100 preset. And when we looked at the data, it seemed like a lot of people were just going right in the middle, right at that $100. And we thought, maybe they're doing that because they need it to cost $100, but maybe they're doing that just because it is one less click for people to do. And maybe they're just going to whatever that preset is, it's really, really easy to change that number if you want to or need to. So we were like, well, let's play with this. Let's not raise the lower end, but let's raise the upper end and adjust that middle range. And that actually worked out really well for us. A lot of people are still going right in the middle at $150. And so that brought up our income a little bit without feeling like we were kind of excluding anybody needing that lower cost. And then the scholarships on that page before, if you just click on that lower link, it takes you to a simple Google form. These are screenshots from my cell phone. The top gives a quick description. And then there are 4 questions to answer. Tell us your full name, your email, whether or not this is your first time having a membership at the tool library, and then what you're planning to do with the tools. So that then gets sent to a Google spreadsheet. One of the board members reviews these, which has been me for the past couple of years. And people put a variety of things in for those answers. We're pretty much not turning anybody away. Every now and then somebody accidentally went to this form who like wants information or wants to volunteer. So for the most part, that's what I'm checking for. Like, oh, you should email the volunteer coordinator, and this isn't the way to do that. There was one other thing on the slide before, which was that when we were first opening up, or hadn't opened yet, and were fundraising, we offered lifetime memberships for $500, and as far as I know, that worked really well. Every now and then I've seen somebody who is one of those lifetime members. I think that was a really good tool. I wasn't around then. That this is kind of from hearsay, but I am working towards opening another tool library nearby and planning to do the same thing. I think it's a great way to just get an idea of, is this something people in your area really want and are really excited about supporting early on and hoping to have in the area for a while. Have you had issues with members, and how have you resolved them? The biggest problem I'd say is late or not at all returned tools. We, about a year ago, were really working on beefing up our membership agreement, and are now requiring a valid credit card to be kept on file. And people are authorizing us basically to, if they disappear, they aren't talking to us, we're trying to communicate, hey, something's late, can we help, what can we do, and they're not paying it and they're not responding, that we do have the authority to just charge that card. We do realize that sometimes people end up in situations where they aren't able to communicate with us, at least for some amount of time. So our policy delays charging that card for several weeks, and we have a maximum of the replacement cost of the tool. Luckily, one of our current board members was in library and inventory management technology for the Army for many years, and has gone through our entire inventory and assessed everything with a replacement value that is pretty accurate. So we have that. That's something you can put into the My Turn software with every item and have those late fees stop accruing when it actually meets that amount of the replacement cost. So that's our maximum late fee for every tool, is just, hey, we got to replace it now, you can keep it.
Thanks for that. I mean, there is kind of a follow-up. Has there been any pushback from members? I know one of the reasons why we didn't initially ask for a credit card on file, and why a number of libraries don't, was for accessibility. To be able to make sure that people could become members if they were unbanked, if they didn't have access to credit, if they had other financial issues. We didn't want that to be a barrier. And it is definitely something that has to be weighed, right? Because then, how else do you track somebody down? What does that relationship look like? I've heard of some libraries, making so somebody can't check out large items, the first couple of times. They've got to check out a hammer or something really basic to begin with to make sure they're bringing it back. So as kind of a two-part question, how have you put in any type of safeguards up to this point? And now that you are requiring a credit card, has there been any pushback, or have you heard from any members that was going to be a barrier?
I think we talked about it at several board meetings, because a lot of us were concerned that would be a barrier to entry. So the revision before this of our membership agreement, I think we had about 10 different ways somebody could verify their identity. It was like, bringing in a bill from a local company and this and that. And it was a lot to pass on to the one staff person, and beyond that, all of the volunteers. We're trying to keep things as simple as we can. It's hard enough just checking tools in and out properly. It took us a while to get to, let's just do the credit card thing, and knowing that it was a trial. Like, if we had gotten a lot of pushback, I think we would definitely change. If somebody came in and said, hey, I don't have a credit card, we would certainly work with them and find a way to work around it. But yeah, Stephanie said there's been like almost no pushback.
Excellent. Do you require members to register online before coming in? And the question is kind of coming because there was, potentially concerns about member comfort, inputting their payment info in a public device at the library itself. So is that something that you've worked on or addressed in some way?
So people can sign up online or directly at the library. All of our events are just open to the public. You don't have to be a member. Sometimes people are signing up there. Most of the librarians are going to say something like they're going to type in all that person's basic info for them. Usually, if I'm there, they say, "Oh, I want to sign up for a membership." I say, "Cool. If you want, we can do it right here. I can type everything in for you, and also you can just go to our website and you can stand there, in the corner. You can sit over there and do it. And in 10 minutes, let me know what you want to check out." But if I am manually entering something for somebody or another librarian, is they're usually going to say, "Hey, it's 50 to 250 suggested donation per year." A lot of people go right in the middle at 150, like no judgment. What's good for you? What works for you? Our culture at the Tool Library and the way that we all know it just amazingly keeps working, and there's not a lot of big pressure to like, "Oh, get that $250 if you can." That passes on to that member, and they really feel at ease just saying whatever works for them.
There was a question here. One, would you be willing to share the valuation sheet that you've created with other libraries? It seems like there's some other existing libraries that are represented on the collab today that would be interested in potentially seeing that, and so they wouldn't have to recreate the wheel.
Yeah, I think we could.
And then another question was around commercial use of items. Do you allow people to use and borrow tools for commercial use for their business, or have you considered creating a membership level for professionals?
That's something we're a little bit loose on still. I mean, if somebody says, "Hey, I've got a big construction company and I'm gonna borrow this once a month," we'd probably be like, "You should like consider, maybe borrow it once to see if it's a tool that's really helpful and valuable." But if you're a business, like, you should probably find a way to afford it with your business. But I mean, for the most part, it's stuff we're still having conversation about, but we want these tools to get used. We dislike the culture of buying something, using it once, and then it going to the landfill. So our shelves being kind of towards the side of empty is a good thing. The tools are getting used.
I'll actually just say, one of the things that I actually do really appreciate about Tool Library specifically is that they can be used for professional development, right? They can lower the barrier of entry to get into a trade. And so people don't have to take out as much debt before starting a business, doing yard work or doing carpentry or doing plumbing or any of these things. And they can utilize a tool library to access those materials, to build up a business, to then be able to get the capital necessary to be able to invest in their own materials rather than going into debt, oftentimes at very high interest levels. And so there can be a major benefit to attracting people that are new to the trades that may not otherwise have financial access. And that was one of the ethics that we brought into the development of the Asheville Tool Library initially as one of our kind of 3 core tenets. 1, supporting that kind of professional development and business work. 2, around the environmental impact. And 3, around just the access to goods in general and reducing the financial barrier to all kinds of materials. So thank you so much, Keenan.